Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. I don't know which part of the world you are joining in. I think we welcome all of you on behalf of AEPF, Asia Europe People's Forum. Today, this webinar is very, very important for all of us, especially for our AEPF colleagues, comrades and friends, and all the workers' movements, different part of the world. They are joining in to understand what's happening in gig economy, platform workers around the world. We have a fantastic list of speakers today who will be speaking from their own struggle, own context, what's happening around the world. I think as an activist, I personally have been learning a lot, the different ways of struggle, how unions is organizing, what kind of creative ideas they are using as a tools to organize workers, and still very difficult to understand. For trade union movement, I can say that it's very, very difficult, very complex to understand. And therefore, we have a fantastic comrades and friends joining from different part of the world to, to explain about what they understand and what kind of question we can raise at this critical juncture, what we're saying that's G20 process in India. And I think Chiara is here from Italy. G20 presidency was there with Italy, also with the UK, US, all the countries. And I think most of us have been part of, kind of involving what's happening in G20. And India this year have taken platform economy, gig economy as a formal agenda to talk about the Labor 20, within the Labor 20 context, within the G20 framework. So we are planning to develop a memorandum and a kind of representation on behalf of the gig workers around the world and initiate a dialogue. We don't know what will be the possibilities, but we're still exploring it and also understanding that what agenda we can take it forward. So just taking a very quick background, we have already circulated the concept note and the larger objective of this webinar. We'll be speaking more about that, but I will not take any more minutes. I'll quickly hand over this floor to Francine. Just quickly talk about what is AEPF and social justice cluster, and then we can go ahead with the panelist, Francine. So over to you, Francine.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sheldon. I have very little to say because you have already very well introduced this webinar, I think. So I just can give you all a very, very warm welcome. I'm very happy and very proud that you are here and that we can have this webinar. AEPF is a very large network of movements and NGOs from Europe and from Asia. And we work in different thematic clusters. This is the social justice cluster. And we see social justice as a very, very broad topic. I mean, it doesn't only include social security, of course it does, but also fight against poverty and inequality, public services, and obviously labor law. And even beyond that, we also work on topics like migration, the environment, and so on, because everything is linked to everything. So I'm very happy to have this webinar. I very much thank the organizers, especially Chandan, for bringing together this wonderful panel. I thank the people of communication who have made this public. So I really hope we have a very good webinar because the topic is indeed very important. We know there is a lot of resistance on the work floor to everything that is happening today, especially with platform workers. And I think we have to tackle this topic because it is very important for the future of the labor movement. And all I can say is that I'm happy that you're here, first of all, but also happy that you have such a wonderful panel with people who will be speaking from their direct experience, and we can all learn a lot from that. That is very sure. So I wish you all a very good meeting, and let us hope this will be a big success. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Francine, for explaining. And I also take this opportunity to request all of you to join APF Social Justice Cluster, where we are trying to build a labor component, and we'll update more about that. So we'll looking forward to learn from you and also build solidarity. So without wasting time, as I said in the beginning, moderator got stuck in the traffic. He will be joining in any minute, but I'm just taking initial role of it. And without wasting time, just quickly ask Yaseen Aslam, our first panel speaker, to speak. Quickly introducing Yaseen. Yaseen is a taxi driver turned union leader. Is one of the original claimants in the landmark legal victory for gig economy workers, an epic 6-year case that saw the UK Supreme Court recognize Uber drivers as workers rather than self-employed contractors. He's a founding president of app drivers in the Couriers Union in the UK and founding vice president of International Alliance of App-based transport workers. So welcome, Comrade Yaseen. Floor is yours. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
hi.
you have
Go
a
ahead.
10 to 12 minutes to speak. Yeah, please go ahead.
That's fine. Thank you. So, firstly,
Yeah.
thank you for inviting me. Just as a way of background, I actually come from an IT background. So, I graduated in the IT sector as a first line support. So, in 2006, I actually got made redundant in my IT job. And I started working as a mini cab driver or private hire driver or taxi driver, as we say in India. So I started this job in 2006. And the reason why I say this is, yes, we started seeing more and more app companies like Uber. So Uber launched in London in 2013. And my point is, look, this trade existed before apps. So we use this word platform workers, we use the word gig workers, but this is just a word. These jobs exist before. Trade union fought many years for these laws, employment laws that we had. And it's just like a sham kind of setup where we have these companies come into the market, and it's not just the UK, this is globally, whether it's India, in Australia, in California. It's the same kind of model, same kind of setup where we have these big, massive companies, corporate, that come into the market, and it's all about misclassification. It's all about exploitation. It's all about wage theft, and the workforce they rely on is vulnerable people. That's the fact. That's the reality. So when we're looking around Europe, for example, it's mainly the BME community. And it's the same when you work, like I have been working with the drivers in Pakistan. I have been talking to Salahuddin in India and also Sangam, also part of the International Alliance. So when we look at the workforce, these are vulnerable, desperate people. So just to give you, like, when I started working for Uber, when they launched in 2013, I was the first driver that actually started working for Uber. The first driver when Uber launched Uber X service in 2013. But yes, I was making good money when they first started. It's great. And it's the same everywhere. So when I talk to the drivers in Pakistan, last year I spent a bit of time in Pakistan talking to drivers, and it's very similar conditions as India. And I met drivers that actually sold their land and jewelries so they could buy a car and work for Uber because they were like sold a dream. And I assume it's the same problem we have in India, where you have a workforce that's heavily invested. And then on the other side, you have a company that's, their cost is next to nothing. Now, the biggest problem we have is with Uber, for example, like where's all this money going to? Are they paying taxes in the local country? No, all that money is going out. But the biggest problem we have is the conditions for the workers. And it's the same with our case in the UK, where we started a case against Uber in 2015. We fought them all the way to the Supreme Court and we won the worker status. But guess what? Uber still failing to comply with that Supreme Court ruling. Why? Because the judge clearly clarified our working time. Now, our working time is from the time we log on to the app to the time we log off. So meaning we're a worker, we should get paid the full working time. Now, here in the UK, Uber interprets that as we're only a worker from the minute we accept the trip to the minute we drop off the passenger. So that's why during that time we're workers. But when we're hanging around or driving to a destination looking for a fare, we're not a worker. Now, the problem I from my experience, like after this lengthy fight, is one, workers do not have the resources to, challenge a big corporate giant like Uber, a lengthy battle. Now, I would turn around and blame the government, not blame them. I think the government is partly responsible because they failed to enforce. So if we got a massive victory in our favor, Supreme Court ruling, there's lack of enforcement by the regulators, lack of enforcement by the government. And this is the same when we look across in different countries. It's the same where in the European Parliament, where there's some good proposed legislation coming up which protects gig workers. And my message, especially around the G20, when we're talking about, like the labor market, the politician or the government need to be doing their bit in terms of making sure there are good regulations to protect the workers, because that is their job, to make sure that the workers' rights ain't being denied. And it's the same with like the UK, where we have these great laws. Yes, we spent many years fighting, we won it, but we were still failing to cooperate. They're failing to, comply to these rulings, the laws. And it goes to show where on one side we have these massive companies, they could literally afford not to obey the law. They have the power, the resources to lobby politicians, and that's what's happening. And this is like, it's very important that we highlight these issues. Like, why should workers have to go out there and fight these lengthy battle when the government is sitting by and watching? Because it's their fight as well. They need to be participating in this. But I think the most important thing here is, like when we look at this, is it's not like when you look at these companies, it's all about isolating the workers. It's all, I mean, that's how it's all is. It's all about you are the boss, you run the business how you want, you're in charge. But in reality, it's about isolating the people. And guess what? Like over the 10 years of us organizing in terms of what we've been doing, we broke that isolation. So in 2020, we set up the International Alliance. What that is an alliance of drivers from 23 different countries that come together, working together, sharing that knowledge, campaigning together. So it's not about the workers ain't resisting. The workers are resisting. They are winning. So in the UK, we are winning. We're winning around Europe. We're winning in Australia. Even in India, I see, Sangam and ITF and also IFAT doing some amazing work there. So they are winning. But the problem we have is the government. Honestly, that is the real issue. If they did their bit, we don't have a problem. And one of the biggest issue I had back in 2013, 14, 15, when I was organizing, is about these workers can't organize because they're right at the bottom of the chain. It doesn't matter, serve them right. Even the bigger traditional trade union, they didn't want to like organize us. They didn't want to get involved. They didn't want to spend resources because to them it was a waste of time. But we proved that narrative wrong. So just to end with it, I mean, I think my message is quite clear. Like we have these great laws, even when you look at ILO, we're seeing these cases across the world, whether it's in Australia, where there is an active case going on against Uber, meaning drivers will win this employee status. We recently saw a case in New Zealand where drivers were classified as employees, and we're seeing this across the world, everywhere. And the real issue is, why is there lack of enforcement? So when we talk about this G20, what is like the labor conditions, like how do we make the laws better to protect these workers? And it's the same in Pakistan. There's recently some talks going on about making sure that they have some good labor protection for people that work in this app sector. And it's quite important. I think this is the message, because we don't see this, and it's down to the government, where they seem to be pushing it back onto the workers. The workers could do so much, but I think there's a lot more that needs to be done in terms of enforcement and drafting out the legislation. Not just drafting it out, but also enforcement. That is the biggest thing missing here. But thank you.
Wow. Thanks, Yaseen. I think you're like much ahead of the time, I would say that. But let me formally hand over my role to Dharmendra, because I'm like was by de facto moderator. So Dharmendra, please take over from here. Brother Yaseen has already spoken now. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Ashim, for the presentation. And we must acknowledge your victory, a legal victory. So thank you for that also. You have won it for all of us. So next speaker, I would like to invite Gayatri. She is very much from India, and she is a very senior lawyer in the Bombay High Court and Supreme Court of India. And she has been facilitating Lawyer for Labor. She is a unique coalition, come solidarity network to support workers in India. She has represented workers on diverse issues, including wages, occupational safety and health, industrial safety, and other issues. She helped file and argued first case of gig workers in Supreme Court of India. She has mentioned many young labor lawyers and serves on advisory boards of various trade unions and works groups. So Gayatri CG, the floor is yours, and you have 10 to 12 minutes.
Yeah. So quickly, I'll just start off with basically the issues that we have raised in our petition. because I think those are crucial issues which cover almost all the problems that we all face all over the world. So one is, of course, gig economy is growing, but unfortunately, there is no commensurate improvement in the working conditions of gig workers. So if we look at gig workers and app-based workers as being part of gig workers, they basically, the reason why labor laws are not applicable to them is because, as everyone knows, that they fall outside the traditional employer-employee relationship. That is the major problem. And because they are not considered as workers, they are also not given the required protection that they would otherwise have had. Now, in the petition that we have filed, we have basically, it's restricted to 4 companies, Ola, Uber, Swiggy, and Zomato. So basically app-based workers, just a representative for respondents. And unfortunately, none of them have actually responded to the petition except for Swiggy, who has given a long-winded reply to the petition, which I don't want to go into right now. But basically, the 4 issues that we have raised is one, that social security is a fundamental right of the workers under the Constitution. So even if we ignore all the existing laws, under the Constitution, workers have a fundamental right to a decent and proper working condition. Article 21 really talks about right to life, which is really a very, very expansive notion of what life is. It includes right to livelihood, it includes right to shelter, it includes right to a decent work, right to health benefits, etc., etc. So right to life has been considered and interpreted in a very, very broad fashion. And that is the fundamental fulcrum of our petition, that this right to social security, right to protection of labor laws is a fundamental right. And that, as Yaseen very rightly pointed out, that it is a responsibility of this government to ensure that these protections are extended, even though the laws might not be applicable, but the right under the Constitution, the fundamental rights that exist should be extended to all app-based workers. And it is a responsibility of the government. So therefore, even under Article 23, which talks about forced labor under our Constitution, if workers are not paid minimum wages, if they are forced to work under slave-like conditions, then that is to be considered as forced labor, and action should be taken against even private companies. That's the first argument. The second argument is that though the app-based companies consider these workers as not workers because they are designated under different names like partners or executives, or even today now they're being called customers. So the courts in India have held, as everybody knows, I don't have to repeat it, is that nomenclature and designation is not the important criteria. It is the nature of work that is important. And therefore, there have been a number of judgments by our Supreme Court which have said that it is the control and supervision test. It is the test of who makes the payment. It is the test of who controls and supervises, who gives the work to the person concerned. And it is not only the control criteria, but it is also the integration test, which basically means whether that person, whether that worker has been integrated into the firm or the company of the aggregator. So the integration test is also relevant. And as we know, and I don't want to repeat it because we know that Ola, Uber, once you get onloaded, once you get logged into the system, everything is controlled by the aggregator. The worker has no control as to what he or she wants to do. So from the time when he is logged in, he or she is logged in, till he or she is logged out, he is not an independent person. And therefore, the workers should be considered as workers under the existing laws and be covered under it. Now, the problem is that because the employer-employee relationship is disguised, and it is not, they are not considered as workers, none of the labor laws are applicable to these workers. So therefore, we have the ESI Act, the Provident Fund Act. Whenever you think that I'm crossing the limit, just tell me. I have two more issues to cover, and then
Please go
log
ahead.
out. So the question is that what was I saying? Yeah, that the ESI Act and the PF Act and the Workmen's Compensation Act, the Industrial Disputes Act, all the labor laws are not applicable to these workers because one, they do not fall within the definition of workman, and two, their linkage is to the number of employees engaged by the establishment. So if the employees engaged by the establishment is less than 10 workers, they will not be covered under the existing law. So that is the reason why they are excluded. Our third argument is that they are covered under the Unorganized Workers Social Security Act, which is an act which was introduced by the central government in 2008. Now that act very clearly defines what an unorganized worker is. And I would just like to point this out because this is a definition which is wide sweeping and it covers all categories of workers who are engaged by app-based aggregator companies. So an unorganized worker means a home-based worker, self-employed worker, or a wage worker in the unorganized sector. And includes, now this is important and this is what is applicable to us, and includes a worker in the organized sector who is not covered by any of the acts which are mentioned in the schedule. So the app-based workers are working in the organized sector, but they are not covered under the existing labor laws because they are not considered as workers. But under this act, they would be considered as workers because they are not covered under the existing labor laws. So I hope I'm not confusing the issue, but basically we have tried to get ourselves covered under the Unorganized Workers Social Security Act, which also says that once you're covered, various schemes can be implemented under the act, and those schemes are relating to number of social security schemes, like for example, medical benefits, or accident compensation, old age pension, etc., etc. So this is one of the reliefs that we have sought in the petition, that we should be covered and considered as the unorganized worker under this particular act. And lastly, I would just like to say that besides this, as far as ride-sharing workers are concerned, that is Ola and Uber are concerned, they are governed, the aggregators are governed under the Motor Vehicles Guidelines of 2020. Now, these guidelines are very, very wide and very interesting in terms of making it applicable to the drivers and workers. What it says, it basically provides the conditions under which the aggregators have to be licensed. And one of the conditions are that the conditions of the drivers should also be taken into consideration. So those include health insurance, term insurance, the working hours, which basically we've been saying it should be 8 hours, but they say it should be 12 hours, and there should be a break of 10 hours. And also, most importantly, there should be grievance redressal mechanism provided for the drivers, which right now it does not exist under any of the laws. So grievance redressal mechanism and sexual, that the women workers should be protected against sexual harassment. And lastly, most importantly, the fare has to be decided by the state government. And that fare has to be reasonable. It's based on a baseline which is fixed by the government, which is said to be the base fare, below which it cannot fall. And in cases of surge pricing, the surge price cannot be more than 1.5% points of the base fare. This is very important because the aggregator companies have been just arbitrarily increasing the prices and the fares, which basically do not really trickle down to the drivers. And lastly, related to the fare, they have also said that 80% of that amount should go to the drivers and 20% to the aggregators. So this is very important in terms of fixing minimum wages for the drivers when we talk about minimum wages. And lastly, it's the transparency of the of the website. Sorry, the website which is not transparent, which is opaque. Drivers do not know on what basis their deductions are being made. How are they going to be paid subsequent to, say, a cancellation, etc., etc. All these aspects which are contained in the app and the algorithm should be made transparent so that the drivers themselves know how these calculations are being made. This forms a part of the guidelines. And that is why I think it's very important that from a practical point of view, from the point of view of trade unions, we should also ensure that at least if the law doesn't change, at least some protections are given under these guidelines. These guidelines are central guidelines. I'll stop just 2 more minutes. Guidelines are central guidelines, and each state is required to frame its own guidelines. So it's not that it should meet only the requirements as set out in the central guidelines. The state government can frame its own guidelines by ensuring that extra protection is given to the drivers. And lastly, I'll just give one more example, a very positive example, which was introduced in Rajasthan. The Rajasthan government has introduced a new bill called the Platform-Based Gig Workers Registration and Welfare Act of 2023. What it seeks to do is it seeks to set up a welfare board, basically where the workers will be registered automatically, even if it's for a few hours, they will be automatically registered with the board, and the aggregators will be made to pay a particular quantum of cess, which will be directly deposited into the fund. So this is a positive act which has been introduced by the Rajasthan state government, since labor is a state issue, and any state can introduce labor relating to any particular section of workers. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Gayatri. I think you have made it very clear that workers are workers, and the nomenclature doesn't matter. And you have also clearly articulated the arbitrariness and unfairness that these companies, aggregators are playing with. So next in line, we have Owen Isplay. Welcome, Owen. Owen Isplay is coordinator of the Make Amazon Pay campaign, which brings together over 80 organizations working towards labor, tax, climate, data, and racial justice. On Black Friday 2022, more than 135 strikes, protests, and other actions took place in over 35 countries as part of Make Amazon Pay's Global Day of Action. Owen has been building campaigns and coalitions to challenge the power of multinational corporations for over 20 years. Owen, we are happy to have you here.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much, Dharmendra, and thanks very much for inviting me to speak about the Make Amazon Pay campaign. It's really great to be part of this important discussion. As Dharmendra said, my name is Owen Espley. I'm one of the coordinators of Make Amazon Pay. And Make Amazon Pay is a label civil society coalition of over 80 groups from around the world who campaign on a whole range of different issues around Amazon's impact in different places. Our members range from global union federations, large international NGOs like Oxfam and Greenpeace, to frontline communities who are impacted and battling Amazon's impact in their neighborhood. We exist to coordinate the work of our members and encourage coordinated action between them, such as the Black Friday or Make Amazon Pay Day, as we like to call it, a global day of action. And as Dharmendra said, last November, it saw over 135 actions in over 35 countries, alongside very important, I hope, first coordinated transnational strikes at Amazon warehouses in France and Germany. By taking action together, we believe we can build the power we need to make Amazon Pay for its impact on workers, communities, and the planet. Today, we're talking about gig work and the new world of work. And this is an area of enormous concern to members of the Make Amazon Pay Coalition, because Amazon has a key role as a leading global driver of increasing worker insecurity, precarization around the world. When Amazon enters a market, it drives down workers' wages their conditions and their safety across that sector. Amazon is destabilizing markets and taking market share from traditional retail employers, many of which have been good employers providing decent jobs in the past. Secondly, Amazon's growth in logistics and fulfillment is disrupting the retail-associated warehouse businesses of those retailers. Amazon warehouses are often staffed with 30 to 50% temporary workers, often agency workers, depending on the market and the season. And this has a pernicious effect on the conditions for all those workers in those warehouses. Amazon uses algorithms within warehouses to turn those agency workers' understandable desire to work fast and beat targets in order to win a permanent role and into inhuman targets that push warehouse workers' bodies beyond healthy limits. Workers working under the threat of dismissal feel less able to exercise their fundamental rights to organize into a union, which means that precarity has a disciplining effect across all workers. And outside of the warehouse and on the road, any sector in Amazon's sites is facing a rapid race to the bottom of working conditions. Postal workers have historically been a place of good working class jobs, and Amazon is placing that under threat. In fact, all last mile delivery companies are facing huge disruption. Amazon's delivery model sees workers in the Amazon uniform driving Amazon branded vans, formerly employed by what they call a delivery service partner, but minutely controlled by Amazon via apps on their phones. That sits alongside Amazon Flex, the Uber of delivery, where drivers deliver goods from their own cars with their own phones, using Amazon surveillance bossware technology. Amazon Relay sees gig work extend into the freight sector, the middle mile, as Amazon's platform sees freight carriers bid for delivery contracts. And of course, you might have heard of Amazon Turk, the largest global microtasking platform that gigifies what is sometimes called artificial intelligence. It's a platform that allows buyers to digitally connect to workers who perform tasks that computers can't. In the US, Amazon's home market, we're seeing the effect of that disruption that it causes. The largest US private sector union contract is with UPS, the United Parcel Service, and that is up for renewal. And it seems likely that the 330,000 workers represented by the Teamsters Union will strike in order to protect the hard-won decent wages and working conditions that they've enjoyed. It's no coincidence that the Teamsters are also looking to launch a major campaign against Amazon going forward. And Amazon has influence as a leading driver of precaritization in the global economy. But that initiative from Amazon is also meeting resistance. In Germany, the union Verdi, which has been striking Amazon Amazon workers for over 10 years, is pushing and seems likely to win legislation that will severely push back on subcontracting within logistics. In the US, the Teamsters Union have organized the first strike of Amazon drivers in Palmdale, California. They're employed by a delivery service partner, yet the Teamsters case will test Amazon's presumption that formal employment can be separated from the degree of control Amazon exercises over these workers who wear its uniform. In India, we have seen Amazon agency warehouse workers successfully resist redundancy and win compensation payments, where Amazon was riding roughshod over hard-won labour rights. In Spain, Global Union affiliate Comisiones Obreras won a court ruling that stated that 2,000 Amazon Flex drivers were wrongly classified as self-employed under their riders law, a law which specifically targets platform work in the delivery sector. In the US film and television sector, Amazon's influence is a major cause of the ongoing strike by the Writers Guild of America, amongst whose complaints is the deepening gigification of writing jobs for television and film, threatening what could once have been considered a very good middle-class job. These step forwards provide hope, but we cannot be complacent. Amazon is growing in power and in influence at an alarming rate. It is seeking to dominate key sectors of the 21st century economy: online retail, logistics and fulfillment, and also cloud computing, where it is significantly larger than its rivals. Behind Amazon's expansion is its use of data, often information on us, ordinary people, but also data on other businesses and commerce. data it can use and has used to further entrench itself into monopoly positions, where it is able to control and extract excessive rents from entire value chains. This type of amassing of power requires a specific response. To make Amazon pay, we must organize all over the global economy. We must organize along value chains. Whilst Amazon's largest retail markets are currently concentrated in the global north, it is expanding into emerging economies like India, Nigeria, and South Africa. And we shouldn't confuse its reach with only those places where it sells and delivers to consumers. The goods that flow through Amazon's marketplace are goods produced in every part of the world, using materials from every part of the world, and it is those chains that Amazon seeks to dominate. This is to say nothing of Amazon Web Services, whose dominance of cloud computing market means it reaches everywhere that the digital economy does. One way Make Amazon Pay has been supporting organised along value chains has been to call global days of action amongst our members in solidarity with garment workers who produce own brand products for Amazon. Amazon now being the largest clothing retailer in the US, but one that threatens hard-won victories such as the Bangladesh Safety Accord. By organising, we can hold Apex employers accountable for their role in the global economy, win agreements from them that prevent a race to the bottom, and open up pathways to win better working conditions globally. Alongside organising, we must win legislation that holds Apex firms accountable, whether that's for labour rights violations in their supply chains, challenging bogus self-employment and agency relationships, which exist only for Apex firms to escape the responsibilities which previous generations have won through struggle. Make Amazon Pay is proud to count among its members groups like the Hawkers Joint Action Committee, who are challenging Amazon's impact on informal retail workers in India and many, many others around the world. Amazon is the epitome of what is wrong with the new world of work. If we want to challenge that and win, it must be in our sights. By concentrating forces on Amazon, by linking up across borders and along supply chain, by linking issues such as tax justice, data rights and competition, workers' rights and the environment together, by organising across boundaries of race, gender and age between workers, boundaries that precarious work entrenches, and by making Black Friday a planetary coordinated day of action against Amazon. By doing all of these things, we can build the power to truly make Amazon pay for the way that is driving down working conditions globally and win a truly new world of work that meets the needs of people and the planet. And I hope you will all join us in that endeavour. Thank you.
Thank you, Owen. Yeah, Amazon is disrupting the industry. It's very true. And thank you for raising the struggle, raising the bar against Amazon in Italy, US, Spain, and also to some extent India, and making this as a campaign, a global campaign. Thank you for that. I would request everyone who is participating in this webinar, you are most welcome to post your questions and answers in the chat box. I can see one hand raised by Avinash Thanvi. Avinash, maybe you can hold it for the last, I think once we finish through the speakers and respondents, we will certainly have sufficient time for your question and answer. So please stay with us. We will come back to you. We also have from Europe, once again, Chiara Mancini, if I am not pronouncing her name incorrectly. Chiara Mancini is an activist and trade union official at FILT, the Transport of and Logistic Workers Union of CGIL. CGIL is the main Italian union with almost 5 million plus members. She is responsible for research department on future of transport work and for health and safety at work. She has been focusing on digitalization, future of work, and role of trade unions for the last 9 years. So welcome, Chiara.
Thank you very much. Hi. The correct pronunciation is Chiara, but it's okay. Don't worry. Thank you.
Chiara. Sorry for that.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation in this very important webinar. As you said, I'm here to tell the experience of FILT-CGIL in Amazon and in the food delivery sector. As you said, we represent as CGIL, which is the confederal trade union, more than 5 million members. I know that in India it sounds like very few people, but in Italy it's nearly 10% of population, so it's not. Let me tell the stories, but before I want to thank Michele De Rose, which is the National Secretary on charge of logistics sector, and Elisa Gigliarelli, which is the National Secretary accountable for international relations. So let's start with Amazon, where we faced a very complex situation, as Owen just explained. In fact, Amazon has several companies in Italy for warehouses management and relies on third-party companies for the actual delivery, most of which are small enterprises. Here we find the most critical working conditions, and this is where our action started. A few years ago, we tried to coordinate the negotiation with each small company under a single dispute to ask that the same national collective agreement is applied everywhere in order to bring the entire supply chain under homogeneous working conditions and not to permit any social dumping. At the same time, we also had to set up a struggle initiative directed to Amazon itself, which culminated on March 2021. For the first time in the world, we organized a national strike for the entire supply chain in Amazon, involving both direct and indirect workers. It was a real success with a lot of participation from workers. The first and most important claim of the strike did not concern a specific contractual institution, but above all, the recognition of the dignity of the union as a negotiating party against the logic of unilateral bonuses and imposed working conditions. The fight paid off. And after the strike, the dialogue started, and in Italy, for the first time on a global level, we reached two agreements, one directly with Amazon and one with the Employers Association of the delivery companies in the supply chain, both blessed by the Ministry of Labor, which were mainly on the issue of industrial relations and the application of national collective agreement. As you understand, therefore, there have been many steps forward, above all on basic conditions for negotiation, which is mutual recognition. What normally is obvious in this context was by no means a given. And then, after that, we could start negotiating working conditions, such as reduction in working hours, economic increases, workloads, continuity of employment and rights in the event of a contract change, prohibition to use technological tools to control workers, and so on. We also established to have preventive discussion on the evolution of e-commerce and company strategies, and on correct data management, which can be shared on request with trade unions. To sum up, Amazon is socially controlled in Italy, and even if there is still a lot to do, the Confederal Transport Union is able to control the situation. The second story I want to tell before summarizing the main learnings is that of Just Eat, a company in the food delivery industry. Here we face the context of job insecurity and fragmentation. So the first action taken by FILT-CGIL together with the other Confederal Transport Unions and the precarious workers unions was to mobilize riders on a local basis. At the same time, and for the first time, we included the profile of rider in the Freight Transport and Logistics National Collective Agreement, the same which is applied in Amazon, ensuring all the typical protection of subordinate work. Being organized by a platform, in fact, does not mean that your work is autonomous, or worse, that it's not worthy of protection. Then Just Eat decided to apply this agreement, so now Just Eat riders are all recognized as employees. An experimental company-level collective agreement was then signed in March 2021, and the agreement includes the introduction of a minimum hourly wage plus increase on holiday or night shifts and a bonus for number of deliveries, but with a maximum limit of orders per hour, so which also entailed for better health and safety, and some other social protections. Nowadays, the dialogue continues to monitor the application of the agreement and to extend this model, which we believe is the fairest one, as Just Eat want to expand its business in the grocery delivery industry in Italy. So let's try to briefly sum up the teachings of these two stories. There are many differences between Amazon and Just Eat. I would not give the same title of platform economy to both of these experiences because they are completely different markets, even if, of course, they are contiguous. In the case of Just Eat, we are talking about the platform economy in its purest form. The digital platform is a tool that a company uses to organize a very traditional job, the one of delivery man, to produce a service that it's not essential service in the value chain, but is a luxury service, and it is a labor-intensive activity. Not to download the cost compression on workers, the only limit is to affirm that the dignity of work is not an optional, as the International Labour Organization affirms, and that companies in this specific sector must find a way to stay on the market, ensuring workers' rights. Our experience in Just Eat demonstrates that it is actually possible to have platform economy together with workers' rights. The case of Amazon, the situation is completely different. The Amazon model is paradigmatic of a real change in freight transport and logistics, which puts the industry at the center of the value chain because it acquires greater strategic importance than it was in the past with respect to production and retail. For the e-commerce consumer, it is more important that the goods arrive quickly and that the process is of high quality, traceable, and reliable. Logistics thus incorporates increasingly complex functions, such as data management of the physical process. This leads to concentration towards big companies or alliances, as we also see, for example, in the maritime global freight transport. This has, of course, dark sides, and I will get to that shortly, but it also makes the sector more solid and less fragmented, potentially allowing workers to unite more easily to claim and win better working conditions. In this context, affirming dignified working condition is not longer enough, even if it's not taken for granted. Here, there is room to make a qualitative leap in the demands because this has become a rich segment of the value chain, and this wealth must be redistributed to workers, both in terms of wages and in terms of quality of work and occupational health and safety and work-life balance. We can do this because despite the importance of technology in this sector, humans are still at the core. They are unavoidable. They are essential workers in a sector which is essential for our society. We tried to do this in our experience at Amazon to value labor, and of course our job is not over. However, as I mentioned, it's not all good. There is a particular point of complexity common to these two disputes, and it is that the remoteness and the obscurity of the decision-making power in this company. The point is not so much, as sometimes is said, that the employer does not exist or even that it is the platform itself. The platform is a tool, while the employer exists and it's clearly identifiable. Only that often it does not have a decision-making center in each country, such as Italy. What is striking is the discrepancy between the technological possibilities, sometimes even overestimated, and the effective rigidity of this algorithm, which cannot be adapted or can be hardly adapted to national or local context. So the concept we need to work on, which is the basis of CGIL strategy on the role of trade unions in digitalization, is that of negotiating the algorithm, which means to bargain the organization of work in the age of digitalization when the algorithms are used to determine timetables, shift workloads, and so on. The idea is not to intervene only ex post through forms of social protection when the effects of technologies have been already determined, but ex ante through the so-called advanced bargaining when the algorithm is designed. Algorithm is not an abstract entity. It is created through a design phase in which the objectives and standards to be followed and the input datasets are provided by humans on the basis of their values and their priorities, and above all, on the basis of what's the main goal for a company, which is to increase profit. Discussing the principles and models that affect the quality and organization of work is actually the job of the union, even if now this is much more complex. Think about artificial intelligence. With AI, it is much more difficult to make the negotiation effective. It is necessary to foresee moments of verification and guarantee the reproducibility of the steps that have led to certain results. This is not simple, starting with the skills needed in the union, but it can be done. To face this complexity, it becomes even more important to have a framework of mutual recognition of these parties. What is needed, and which is too often lacking today, is that companies do not allow us to sit down at the table and open the black box of the organization of work. But in the experiences I have told you about, we have shown with all challenges still open that we can go in this direction. Not having access to the real decision-making center where algorithm is actually designed, we insisted that there was a legitimate party at national level to negotiate with, but it is urgent to extend the range of action at international level, making international trade unions legitimate holders of bargaining with multinationals. As FILT-CGIL, we are doing our part to make progress in the International Organization of Workers. As experiences I have told you have become a common heritage in the ETF and ITF, which are the European and International Federations of Transport Workers Unions. And the ETF is organizing an International Day for Decent Work for Logistics on 7 October 2023, precisely to give visibility to the success and challenges of unions in the sector and to call on employers and politicians to their responsibilities. Moreover, ETF and ITF are also actively participating in the Make Amazon Pay campaign organized by Uniglobal. I'm about to finish. I hope that what I have said in this short speech can be as inspiration for you, and it's also interesting to learn from your experience, very, very interesting. However, I cannot help but notice the difficult situation Indian unions find themselves in, which makes it very difficult to address these and other challenges for decent labor. I am referring to the unspeakable decision of the Indian government in the involvement of local unions in Labour 20, with respect to which I want to reiterate our absolute opposition to the involvement of only BMS union, which is not affiliated to the ITUC, and the lack of involvement of other unions. As CGIL, CISL and WIL, the Italian Confederal Trade Unions, we have expressed our concern also in a formal note to the Italian government. And because there is not only a problem of what can be discussed, but above all, there is a problem of democracy. With this note of disappointment, on behalf of FILT and CGIL, I wish good job and good fight to the comrades of Indian trade unions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chiara. I hope I pronounced your name correctly this time. Okay, thank you for, I think, opening up the black box of algorithm and AI for us. Yeah, so we have Monika Mehta joining us from US, and it must be very early, Monika. Thank you. Yeah. So thank you for joining us. Monika is currently the Deputy Director of the Rule of Law Department at the Solidarity Center, where she is focusing on labor and workers' rights issues. She also helps maintain and grow the ILAW network, a global network of labor lawyers. Prior to joining the Solidarity Center, she focused on holding global apparel brands accountable for labor, human and environmental rights violations occurring in their global supply chain. So she focuses on cases in South and Southeast Asia, where she helped different labor leaders, lawyers, community activists, and NGOs so that they could continue to exercise their fundamental human rights. So what is the time, Monika, right now for you? 5 o'clock?
Now it's almost 6 o'clock, but yes, it was 5 when we started.
It's still very early for us also, for everyone in fact. So I can see some hands have been raised by Avinash, Anvi, and Avinash Kumar. So Anvi and Mr. Kumar, you can also put your questions in chat box if you wish. Otherwise, we will have you in the end. So we just have 2 respondents after Monika finishes her speech. So please stay with us. Yeah, Monika, please go ahead.
Great. I wanted to just say thank you to the organizers for inviting me to be part of this panel discussion today. And it's been really nice to hear from so many people who I've heard from before and hear similar outcomes and challenges and successes from all over the world. For those who may not know, I wanted to take just a moment to introduce ILAW, which is the International Lawyers Assisting Workers Network, which, as Dharmender mentioned, is a global network of labor and worker rights lawyers coming together.
Monika, I can hear some kind of echo from your sound.
Oh,
is there some technical problem? Maybe you can try again.
Yeah. Is that any better? Are you still hearing echo?
Not so. Yeah, we still can hear the echo.
Yeah.
Maybe Vishnu can help us if he's here.
Is this any better?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is better. This is better. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Great. Well, I was just saying the International Lawyers Assisting Workers Network, or ILAW, is a global network of labor and worker rights lawyers coming together to learn, collaborate, and strategize the best ways to represent the rights and interests of workers and their organizations. We have just reached over 1,000 members in 88 countries with regional coordinators in Colombia, Kenya, Georgia, and Bangladesh. And through ILAW, we provide support to our members to conduct research, file amicus briefs, support strategic litigation, host webinars, in-person meetings, conferences, workshops on a variety of issues that have been identified by our members as being priorities. And one of those main areas is workers in the digital platform or gig economy. And through requests and knowledge sharing among our ILAW members, it became clear to us that this form of work has been expanding exponentially with vast implications for workers and their lawyers. The reality is that denying a group of workers rights based on the type or form of work they perform is not new for us in the labor movement. But what made this a little more unique was the use of technology and in particular algorithms. The use of this technology to assign work, set working conditions, essentially make hiring and firing decisions was newer for lawyers and judges alike to navigate in terms of existing labor law. And as we started seeing litigation against the misclassification of these workers start in various countries, and we began receiving requests from ILAW members to support these cases, we wanted to create some resources for lawyers, unions, and workers in the digital platform that they can use as they continue to challenge these misclassifications. So over the last few years, we produced 2 reports, and I'll put the links in the chat afterwards, Taken for a Ride, Litigating the Digital Platform Model, and Taken for a Ride 2, Accelerating Towards Justice, both of which include in-depth analysis of the legal and legislative reforms that have taken place around the world, and include a digest of judicial decisions from around the world where misclassification of workers has been challenged. And although the cases in these reports focus mainly on ride-hailing and food delivery sectors, I wanted to recognize that we know that digital platform work is expanding past this to other sectors, particularly in domestic work and healthcare that we're seeing worldwide. This model of work is not going away, and as it continues to expand in new sectors affecting more and more workers, we want to identify opportunities for success, replicate where we've seen successes, and find ways to break through challenges that we've been seeing. We also know that workers for digital platforms are often facing increased levels of discrimination, informality, gender-based violence and harassment because they come from marginalized communities, are often migrant workers, and this leads to further exploitation for these workers and the need for why unions, worker organizations, and labor lawyers really need to work together to combat against these sorts of insecure forms of work. In our research and through our reports, one of the most clear findings has been the consistency with which courts around the world have found that ride hailing and food delivery workers are employees and not independent contractors. There are notable outliers like Australia, Georgia, parts of the US, but in general, when we look at the litigation that has taken place from Uruguay to the United Kingdom, as our brother mentioned earlier, to New Zealand, we have seen that courts have found that despite many attempts by these digital platform companies to deny their obligations to workers, the control and subordination wielded by these companies clearly indicates an employment relationship, and that these workers are entitled to minimum wages, regulated working time, overtime pay, holiday pay, an ability to join and form a union, and so much more. And as we worked to track these cases, we've seen lawyers reference decisions from other courts, and we've seen judges referring to decisions from other jurisdictions in their final rulings. So we know that these cases matter. But we've also seen that these companies have continued to flout the rulings by slightly adjusting their algorithms and contracts to try and circumvent the decision that was made, which then requires workers to go back again to court for another ruling. And we know the companies have vast financial resources, and them going back and through litigation and in these vicious cycles is beneficial to them, but it continues to hurt our members, our workers, and the union movement at large. So it is not enough to just have these litigations in court. We need to think about strategies that have holistic, impactful results. And that is why what we also are looking at is legal reform and regulations, which are another key element to combat this, as we were hearing from other speakers today. So that we can ensure that these workers are fully able to exercise their rights and are recognized in law. Let's be clear, recognizing these workers as an employee rather than an independent contractor is the bare minimum. There's still a lot of work to be done to ensure that these workers are recognized, protected, and fully able to exercise their rights. This is just the sort of floor, as it were. We've seen various countries begin to regulate or try to regulate digital platform companies, from my home state, California's attempt at AB5 to Spain's Writers' Law to the law in Chile. But we also know that these digital platform companies have vigorously come after these laws. They're challenging them in court, they're openly flouting them, and they're spending millions of dollars to push through their own laws, like Prop 22 here in California, which luckily is still being challenged, so we haven't seen the last of it. But regulating the digital platform economy within existing labor law should be easy, with so much case law that has already existed interpreting the employment relationship, to allow for these workers to be under the purview of existing labor law with its rights, benefits, and protections. But the threat of leaving the market, the lobbying, and the massive resources that these platform companies have led to successful stoppages of these laws, or counteracting them with their own very bad laws, or just ignoring them completely. We're also starting to see sort of initiatives at the EU level and at the global level to try to think about regulating this economy. The EU directive is still in negotiation, and I think there might be others that can speak more directly to that. And also the International Labor Organization will be taking up standard setting on this issue in the next few years. And it's imperative that workers and their organizations and labor lawyers are clear and cohesive in their demands to advocacy. This flouting of laws, ignoring of judgments, and slight adjustments to algorithms and contracts by these companies continues to allow them to, be absolved and avoid their responsibilities. So we need to have strong and clear laws, good judgments, and as Yaseen was saying, government agencies willing to enforce these laws and judgments so that these companies are forced into compliance. We have a critical role to play as governments grapple with how to regulate not just platforms, but algorithms and AI, as regional governance structures create new directives, and with the opportunity at the ILO to negotiate a strong, clear, and enforceable standard. We've seen incredible organizing efforts by workers from around the world who work for digital platforms, who are striking, advocating for changes, and litigating. And we all need to continue doing so as this work form expands, but also as opportunities for change increase. We need to ensure that independent democratic trade unions and worker organizations representing gig workers have a seat at the table and are able to directly articulate their needs, concerns, and challenges. And we need to ensure that new laws and regulations take into account the power imbalance that exists and create strong enforcement mechanisms that have a hefty penalty for non-compliance, so that as these companies ignore or flout the law, they have penalties and are not able to just write it off as a cost of doing business, which often happens. And we need to ensure that we are holding our government institutions as well as these companies accountable for lack of enforcement and violations of laws as they come into effect. There's more I'd probably say, but I'll stop there given the short time, but happy to answer questions later. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Monika, for taking the time so early for all of us. And I think the legal perspective is the most important one when the law is being tested everywhere and being redefined. The boundaries are getting tested again. And without wasting any time, I would now request one of our two respondents. So we have two respondents in this webinar. One is Mikyung Ru and other is Sangam Tripathi. So with the due permission of Sangam sir, I would request Mikyung Ru to be the first respondent. Mikyung is representing Korean Confederation of Trade Union, which is one of the largest trade union organization in Korea, effectively representing 1.2 million workers in both public and private sector. They are organizing precarious workers, which includes gig workers. So welcome, Mikyung.
And also it's also it's also late night in Korea. So thank you, Mikyung, for joining us. It means a lot. Thank you. It's a very late night in Korea.
Hi, everyone. It's 10 p.m. in Korea right now.
Oh.
And I'm happy to can join you because I found that this discussion is a continuation of the last year's L20 Labor 20 meeting in Indonesia. At that time, under the Indonesian presidency, the digitalization of economy and the labor rights protection, especially for the platform workers, was one of the agenda, and it was discussed during the L20 meeting, and the representatives of the trade unions in G20 country submitted our demand on this issue to the G20 leaders. And at the time, there was some two concerns about the trend of a G20 meeting. One is the lack of participation and exchange, especially for the trade unions engagement with the G20 leaders, because at that time, the head of states of G20 companies participated in the B20 meeting, the business 20 meeting, to listen the employers and business demand, but they didn't send any representative to the L20, and they just sent one of the Indonesian minister to receive the demand. And the second one is there has been a lot of commitments made by the G20 leaders, but we found the lack of implementation. Their commitments have never put in practice in domestic level and international level. But the worry and concern was much bigger under the Indian presidency of the G20. So as Chiara mentioned, the government is control even the trade unions meeting, and they appointed the chair of the L20. So the ITUC and the trade union confederation in G20 companies are now boycotting the official L20 meeting, which was controlled by the Indian government. So it is very important, and it's our responsibility and our role to deliver the workers' voices to the head of states of G20 companies, G20 countries. So yeah, last year when we discussed about the labor rights protection for the workers in gig economy, I shared the experience of the KCTU's activity to organize the platform workers and to expand the fundamental labor rights for all workers, including the gig economy. And I found a lot of similarity what you, today's panelists mentioned about their activity. We also tried to put a lot of resources of the campaign to organize the gig economy workers, including the food delivery workers and the proxy drivers, which is very unique in Korea. And we also try to change our law to cover all workers, including the gig economy, by expanding the definition of worker and employer. And we also try to build a special collective bargaining system, which is fit for the platform workers, because in Korea, only workplace level collective bargaining between the employer and the direct employee are allowed, and it is not possible to negotiate with the indirect employers by the precarious workers. So some unions within the KCTU, including Korean Services Workers Union and Korean Public Transport and Services Workers Union, try to build collective bargaining with platform companies, which is real employer of the platform workers, who control the working conditions and their wages and so on. And we also campaign to expand the coverage of the social security. We started with the industrial accident insurance because the fatal industrial accidents, the death of the food delivery workers during the pandemic became a very big social issues, and the decree and law was changed so that the platform workers can be enrolled in the social security system, and it is expanded to the employment insurance as well. But we have far away to go, because in this change, only small portion of the platform workers can be covered by the social security. So it is a big challenge. So in conclusion, in last year, and it is, I found I can summarize today's discussion by the panelists in the same way. So we now, until now, we get some recognition of employees' status of the platform workers through the individual litigation and case law. So to reduce the effort, we have to make some convergence in the legislation in each country, so that the workers can exercise their fundamental labor rights, including the right to organize and right to collective bargaining and right to strike, for example, by expanding the definition of worker and employer. And we also solved the problem with the misclassification of the platform workers as self-employed. So some domestic legislation and the negotiation for the EU level directive on the platform work give some kind of inspiration to make this. For example, they are including the presumption of the legal presumption of the employee status for platform workers, and they shift the burden of proof from worker to employer. So it could be a good direction to build some kind of legislative standard. And so we can deliver our message for the G20 leaders, the head of states of G20 countries, to introduce the domestic legislation to make all the platform workers can exercise their labor rights, and they can be rightly classified as worker and enjoy all the legal protection and their rights. And at international level, it was discussed last year as well. As Monika mentioned, in 2025, the ILAW will start the discussion for to introduce the new international labor standard to protect the platform workers. And the workers in the ILAW is expecting to have this international labor standard as a legally binding convention instead of a recommendation. So we have to raise our voices to persuade the governments to agree on this position of the workers at a global level. So I thank you very much for your presentation, and express my solidarity to all the workers you organize, the platform workers, and expand the platform workers' rights. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So our last person on the panel as respondent is Sangam Tripathi ji. Sangam Tripathi ji is the principal advisor of Indian Federation of App-based Transport Workers, and he has helped organize and build first ever union of gig workers in India. Previously, he has worked with global unions like ITF as Assistant Regional Secretary of Asia Pacific Region, and in that capacity, he has helped build and stimulate unionism in transport sector, not only in South Asia but also beyond the region. Sangam Tripathi ji, you are most welcome. So once Sangam Tripathi, hello.
Yeah. We
Sangam,
can hear
are you
you.
there? So after him, we will open up the question and answer session. So I hope all panelists are with us. Can you see him, Chandanji? Sangam?
Yeah. I'm trying to contact him because he called me a few minutes ago and said that he was facing some internet connectivity issues. I don't know what is that, but yeah. But I think we can take some questions, and if Sangam joins, then we can again ask him to respond. So instead of waiting for him, just take up the questions and ask all the panelists to respond. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, so we can open this for question answer. As I go through the chat box, I don't see any question in the chat box. So this webinar is open for question and answer, and people please do ask your questions, queries, or anything if you wish to add to what has been said today. So we had Avinash Thanvi who had raised his hand earlier. So Avinash, are you here? Yeah, Avinash is yeah.
So yeah, yes, Avinash can speak. Yeah.
Yeah, Avinash, now you can speak.
Thank you very much, Dharmendra ji, for taking my question or taking me into consideration to talk to you. Thank you very much. Sir, my name is Avinash. I'm into All India Professional Congress, and currently, actually, I want to give you some background before starting a question. If you know that Rajasthan government is coming up with the board and a proper bill for gig workers in Rajasthan. This is, I think, the first time in India or a world that some government is taking the action and making a board for and allocating a budget for that. So currently what we are doing is we are meeting with the gig workers, like especially Ola, Uber drivers, and the delivery guys. But the problem we are facing is they don't know their rights first. Secondly, it's very difficult to connect with them because they are regularly on a way to doing their job, and their time is very precious for them. So I just want to understand if you guys are regularly talking about it, gig workers and all. Is there any way, another way to connect with them and inform more about them about the bill? How we can do that? If we can suggest how to communicate with them in a larger way.
Yeah, Avinash, I think Sangam is back.
Yeah, I'm
with us
ready. I'm
now.
sorry. I'm really.
So Sangam is the
Apologies.
best person to respond to your question also.
Yeah, apologies, comrade, for this technical glitch. Yeah,
Okay.
I'll also try to.
But before responding to the question, Sangamji, please have your time to make your intervention. Please go ahead, Sangam bhai.
There's something wrong with my video, so that's what I was struggling to get onto. Anyway, yeah, in fact, I even responded on the chat with Avinash, and I'm going to call him up and talk to him more about the Rajasthan bill after the webinar. So, comrades, thank you very much. I'm not going to repeat what has already been said in the context of India. I would just kind of give you the large picture scenario apart from what Gayatri has already talked about. When we are talking about workers, we are talking about something like 15 million young workers. You can imagine the numbers, and particularly after COVID, this gig and platform business model has been kind of institutionalized, because this is the preferred business model of the employers, where they can exploit. They don't have to give regular work. In the name of flexibility, they still have workers who drive for 18 to 20 hours, who deliver food for 17 to 18 hours, who don't have to be paid minimum wages, whose earnings, what we call wage theft. We are going into all these aspects and trying to bring them out. Poor quality of life parameters, no social protection, poor working conditions. So these are the kind of workers that we are talking about, and normally, our politicians in India say, oh, India is a great country. We have a demographic dividend. Our entire population is a young population, but it's a big shame, isn't it? What kind of jobs are we providing to the youngsters who enter the labor market? A lot of the people have already started saying that this present generation, the average age, the median age of a gig worker or a platform worker in India is about 27. So you can imagine at the age of 27, if he or she is doing the kind of jobs they are being asked to do or made to do, what kind of, conditions they will grow up in. And this will probably be recorded in our history as a lost generation. So that's a situation Gayatri has talked about, and I'll just kind of expand a little bit on it. So 2017, we started organizing these gig and platform workers, and it took us about 3 or 4 years, 3 years. And by 2019, we all realized that, small and dispersed voices of these workers will take us nowhere. We have to give ourselves a face. We have to give ourselves an entity, a kind of a window where we stand, we combine the weak organizations and the weak workers into one entity. And that's how we established the Indian Federation of App-based Transport Workers in late 2019. This was just before COVID. And then, of course, COVID struck and, everything came down like a pack of cards. People were all kind of, locked in. And in spite of that, of course, the food delivery riders and even the cab riders, they played a very important role, but there was no recognition whatsoever of these workers as COVID warriors, and they went through a very, very difficult time. Going after the COVID, of course, as Gayatri said, that we continued organizing. One of the other colleagues from the Amazon Pay said, and that really is the guiding principle for us also, and that is organize, organize, and organize. So we basically in our organization, we have kind of three pillars which take us forward. The first one, of course, is organizing. Until and unless we are not organized on the ground, nothing really matters. Nobody listens to you. Nobody sits and talks to you. So as of today, through these last 5 or 6 years, we have reached in about 10 Indian states. We have about 30 Indian states, and we have reached in 10 of them. And we have today around 15 unions, all organized under the Indian Federation of App-based Transport Workers. And the organizing, of course, continues because that is the core work that will take us forward. The second pillar of our organization is influencing policy. Like many colleagues said, that until and unless I mean, this is a new area, a brand new.
Sangamji, please conclude.
I think we lost him. Yeah.
Okay, so can we take up a question in between?
Yes, I think
we should. Yeah, I think we should. Yeah. So there is one question in the chat box from Jeffrey. The question is, do we have any experience on multi-employer bargaining? If yes, in what country? So Yaseen Aslam has to leave now, I believe. So Yaseen, would you like to respond to this question?
Sorry, what was the question again?
The question is that, do we have any experience on multi-employer bargaining in any country?
Yes, we do. I mean, the thing is, look, going forward, we're seeing more and more of this collective. So it's like in the UK, we have GMB that is recognized by Uber. Yeah, so they have a collective agreement. But at the same time, when you talk about employers, we're talking about Ola, we're talking about Bolt, it's talking about Uber. So trade union can, or any organization can, collectively agree with them. Now, when I go back to the argument in terms of legal argument, in terms of workers, one of the arguments that we had was whether you're working for Uber or whether you're working for Ola, you're still a worker. So just going back to another question that was in the chat box, I think it's very important to understand, look, in the UK, we have 3 employment status. So we have self-employed, independent contractors, and then you also have an employee right at the bottom where you have so many statutory rights like sick pay, holiday, pension, maternity, paternity, where in the UK, we also have a middle status, which they call a Limb B workers. So in the UK, we're able to classify as Limb B workers, which means we're entitled to basic right. That means the right to holiday pay, the right to minimum wage and pension. That's all it is, basic rights. So in the UK, we still have an ongoing battle. Unfortunately, for people like myself, I haven't worked on the Uber platform since 2017. So we need active drivers in order to challenge the Supreme Court ruling, meaning Uber's failing to comply. And the biggest problem we have in this sector, or when you talk about the gig workers, is these workers are not able to spend years and years into the fight. So as one of the panelists mentioned, we are employees. Like, workers need to have statutory employment protection entitlement. For example, we saw this during the pandemic when we had COVID. What happens when workers go off sick? So these are statutory rights that we need to be talking about. How do we get them? Yes, we do need to have collective agreement with employers, and that's something the government need to be pushing, because there is issues around transparency. And we're seeing this with Amazon, we're seeing this with Uber, where a lot of these systems are programmed in a certain way where there is no transparency around the algorithm. So these are the kind of things that we need to be talking about, is how do we get this transparency? How do we enforce these employers to recognize the workers and work with the trade union that are representative of the workers? So it's very like Uber are engaging with some unions. So it's like, if you look at New York, there's a union called IDG. This was a union created by Uber. So we've got to make sure it's the right union. But just in a nutshell, I think the issue is, look, the issue hasn't been sorted. Workers are willing, but we need to be working in solidarity. There's a lot of work that needs to be done by, whether you're legal profession, whether you're academics, whether it's other trade union. We need to be coming together, acting in solidarity, so we could win this fight. So it's the same fight whether you're working, whether you're fighting against Amazon, whether you're fighting against Uber, whether it's Ola, Deliveroo. It's the same exploitation. It's the same kind of abuse. And the workers right now need that unity. They need that support. They need that solidarity in order to win this fight. Yeah. But that's it for me. Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me.
Just before Yaseen leaves, moderator, with your permission, I want to say one thing.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay. So, there's a lot of interest, and I feel that if other speakers can also speak about it, and I understand Yaseen has to go, but we have a labor ministerial of G20 process next month, and then we have a finance ministerial of the G20 process in following month, which is in September. And as an APF social justice cluster, we definitely have a huge interest to, kind of consolidate all the wisdom, what we gathered today, and all of you speaking about. I mean, Chiara, Mikyung, all of you spoke about also the, kind of differences and conflict, and also the hostility, the way, things are happening here. The recognized trade union voices are not reaching it out. So how do we do it? But as far as the gig economy workers is concerned, we really want to consolidate all the effort, what's happening around the world, and give it to the government, because in G20 process, all the big economies are part of it. So we're really looking forward, Owen, you, Chiara, Yaseen, Monika, Mikyung, all of you, Gayatri ji, all of you, to, kind of give us the perspective which we can consolidate and give it formally to the, this process, the finance ministerial and the labor ministerial, both, which is happening in coming months. And we can do some also a kind of following campaign around it, where the gig workers' voices are heard, because platform economy workers have been chosen as a formal agenda in the L20. So just wanted to reiterate and seeking your solidarity and advice. Thank you so much.
So I think before you get the response from the speakers, we have another questions here. So Vinu Pillai, can you make him able to ask the question? Vinu Pillai.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, Vinu, please go ahead.
I am speaking from India, and the talk has been more about the non-knowledge workers, if I understand. Is there any special legislation which the forum is looking at, wherein, if I am coming from a startup or a tech industry wherein moonlighting is the norm. So if anybody has to make these kind of assignments or second hustles legally, I mean, is there any I would say approach to these kind of knowledge worker project-based assignments, wherein both people who are working on the job or otherwise or retired can openly do it and legalize it? So that's my question, sir.
So any of the panelists are welcome to respond along with what Chandan was asking for, how to intervene in the G20 process. Owen, do you want to have a go on this?
Sure. I mean, in terms of the G20 process, one way is to look, as I think some of the panelists have talked about the very specifics of the agenda, and advocate with a view to influencing that agenda. And another is to see it as an opportunity to face not upwards towards the leaders of the G20, but down towards our movements and see the ways in which we can mobilize around it and use it as an opportunity to discuss what is the G20 up to, what is the shape of the global economy that they seek to represent, and what is our story about that economy, and how can we mobilize people behind a different story, and a story that involves organizing and winning in it. And I think sometimes it can do both things. The difficulties of engaging kind of with legitimate actors and the rest of it, and the tricks that get played at that kind of level, mean that sometimes we're better off focusing on how we use it to sort of jump off into our stories that we want to tell, basically. And I think certainly that's one of the very useful things and interesting things about the discussion we're having today is building a kind of common discourse, building a common framing, building links and the similarities between what's taking place in lots of different, both for kind of from different perspectives in terms of different, what's the word, toolboxes that we might have in front of us, but also from different localities. And as those things come together, I think it really does strengthen us in our movements and in our campaigns as we go forward. And I think that's probably where I would be looking for the G20 kind of work for the Asia Europe People's Forum to be doing work in it. I wouldn't sort of, what's the word, yet aspire, shall we say, for it to have a specific agenda on the L20 outcome and the statements that the G20 leaders make, but that will come once we're stronger, and it can be used as an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Owen. So we have already taken almost 100 minutes. So I think now we should go to conclude this webinar. So any last words from any speaker or panelist, if you wish to say something before we hand this over to Franklin for the concluding remarks? Monika wants to say something. Yeah, please, Monika.
Gayatri can go if she would like to go first. No problem.
Can't hear.
We can't, yeah.
Monika, can you speak a little louder? We can't hear you. Yeah.
Now we can hear.
Go ahead.
Now?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I think I just wanted to reiterate something that was said by panelists earlier, is that what we see often is that no matter who the gig company is, Uber, Zola, Rappi, you see them using the same tactics over and over again, right? They make the same arguments in court about why their particular set of workers are not employees. They make the same arguments to policymakers. They make the same threats about leaving an environment, leaving a country. And they make the same arguments when they're trying to push their version of legislation. And so I think, we're seeing that side be very cohesive in what they do. They do the same thing over and over again, right? And so we're kind of playing whack-a-mole. Like, we fix it here, have it pop up here, fix it here, pop up here. And so I think we as a movement really need to think about what is our strategy that we are using every single place, right? We know what's working. We're seeing what judges are looking for. We're seeing what legislators find interesting, right? We know there's workers, legislators, lawyers, judges who are willing to hear this, are willing to make the arguments. But I think we need to be as cohesive as that side is in our arguments, and so that we're not recreating what's working everywhere. And that's as we organize more and more workers, which is so critical and can't be done without it, but also as we litigate and also as we do legislative advocacy. So I just wanted to sort of highlight that. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Monika. So now we will have Franklin for concluding remarks. Franklin, please conclude this whole webinar.
Go ahead, Francine, go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. Of course, I cannot give a full summary. It would be impossible. This has been a very, very rich debate. And
Can't hear.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear, but maybe you can a little louder if possible.
Okay, I'll come a bit close. Yeah. So no, this was a very, very rich debate. So it is impossible to give a full summary. I just would like to mention 3 points, some general points. That's actually what we can do at the level of companies, and third, what we have to do at the level of governments and G20. For the general points, I very much agree with what Monika said. This is not a new problem. This is an old problem of employers who want to exploit workers. It's very simple. Of course, it takes a new form in this platform economy, but it is not a new problem. And the main problem for workers is indeed their labor conditions. But we should be aware that this is a matter of human rights that have been defined and that have to be respected. But there is a whole new class of workers that is now being created, which we can call a proletariat, a precariat. But as a personal note, I would like to add to this that this is part of a whole exercise of dismantling the status of waged workers, which is an indirect way to do away with all social security protection. And that is what's happening now in the specific form of the platform economy. But it is about the status of wage workers that they do not want anymore. It happens in other sectors as well. In several European countries, this is now happening in supermarkets. They all have to be franchised. And that is what is happening. Now, what we can do at the level of corporations, the different things that have been said. First, negotiate what I think it was Chiara, negotiate the algorithm. Because it is indeed a bit contradictory that you have, on the one hand, the flexibility of workers, and on the other hand, the rigidity of the algorithms. You have to organize. It has been said many times, which is the very important role of trade unions. Never forget, we need to organize, and there also AEPF can play an important contributing role. We hope we can play that role. We have to work on transparency and enforcement of the laws and the rules. And then finally, at the level of governments and G20, the first speaker so clearly said this is a responsibility of governments and of the G20. It is a matter of regulation of the markets. It is a matter of regulation of the labor markets. And that is the point that we have to focus on and that we can use for preparing a strategy, a memorandum for the G20. So I think, again, thank you so very much for this very rich debate. I think we can go on with the work we are doing. This has been very, very helpful, and I very much hope we can count on you in the future. So, and please, indeed, do come all to the social justice cluster of AEPF. That is where we can prepare the work and cooperate. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Francine. Thank you.
And I think we all must thank the Social Justice Cluster of Asia Europe People's Forum for bringing all of us together. And I think there are different groups with different traits and different perspectives who have come on this issue. And just on the last thing that I would like to say, that the whole geopolitics, whether G20 or even beyond G20, any free trade agreement, regional agreement, economic partnership, trade investment partnerships have e-commerce at their core. So they are taking it as a economic driving force, key driving force, and we do need to have a check and balance and a proper regulatory framework which can at least rein them in favor of not only workers but people in large, society in large. And Social Justice Cluster is taking a lead on this important aspect of gig economy. Platform economy is something very welcome for us, and in days to come we would like to see more synergy between all of us. ILAW is doing a great work, and they are already in midst of one research, and we all are hoping to gain and learn from that research. and that will obviously help all of us to strategize in a better way in organizing workers. And Make Amazon Pay campaign is already gaining momentum and is already in its 4th edition. So we look forward to more power to such campaigns and more synergy between AEPF, Make Amazon Pay campaigns, and all of us. So with this note, I will just hand over to Chandan for vote of thanks.
There's nothing vote of thanks. I'm going to trouble all of you. Chiara, Owen, Monika, everyone, Gayatri ji, everyone. So yeah, we really need your help and solidarity and guidance to articulate our demands, and we're planning to do organize activities around it. I mean, Sangam would have spoken about. We have been thinking about what if we can do some physical activities also during Labor Ministerial, which is happening so soon. So we'll touch base more, soon about it. We'll tell you about that, and we will see. I'm not sure if any one of you can come, but we might definitely want to have you online, even in that physical activity. So that's the one thing. And special thanks to the support team like Hasnan, our intern Srivardhan Reddy, Vishnu, all of them for helping and supporting the whole technical side on behalf of AEPF Social Justice Cluster. Very grateful to you for finding time. And this is just a beginning, because I think next 4 months going to be a lot of roller coaster ride and circus around G20 without much hope, but still we want to intervene it as far as the gig economy is concerned. So thank you so much for all your time. Thanks. Thank you so much to Dharmendra Kumar at the last for moderating so well. Grateful to you, Comrade Dharmender, and looking forward for more campaign activities with Make Amazon Pay and gig workers and so on. Thank you so much for moderating it. Yeah.
Thank you everyone. Thank you, Chandan.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chandan. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.